India's future rests on the well-being of its women and children. With this very interesting panel of leading doctors and gynecologists, let's discuss how we can reshape women and child healthcare through policy shifts, innovations, and a more holistic approach. Dr. Pranati Reddy, I would like to start with you. In your experience, how can we better integrate preventive care like early screenings with regular checkups into mainstream healthcare to ensure women across India have access to lifelong wellness?
So, I think the most important thing that we could focus on, because I think that's really an indicator of the kind of quality of healthcare that a nation can provide, is maternal health, in terms of pregnancy and delivery. And if you look at things like early screening, I guess it will be important for us to start at a point which can be the very worst outcome for a woman who's pregnant. A woman who's pregnant, who's trying to bring new life into this world, if she dies, and that's maternal mortality. And while we've been good, a woman dying while giving birth is a very unacceptable outcome. If you look at that from our own country's point of view, we've been good about it, I think. I think we've brought it down significantly. But at 97 per 100,000 births, which means, around 35,000 women are actually dying giving birth, it's something that we need to look at very closely. And prevention, like Dr. Bhanushali was mentioning, is better than cure. And if you look at this landscape of maternal mortality, it teaches us a lot of lessons. You find that the lowest rates of maternal mortality are in the southern states. Kerala is at 19, Telangana and Andhra are at 40s. Karnataka is at 57. So if somebody is at 19, 57 and 40 with an overall maternal mortality of 97, there should be somebody at 200, 170. And who are those at 200, 170, 180? Assam, Rajasthan. And the common theme here is, poverty, remoteness of areas, lack of education, and these are contributing most to maternal health. And this is a challenge that we face. And I think there are a lot of things that can be introduced to prevent this from happening. And I think a lot of things have been done. The government has been really proactive to have brought down that maternal mortality rate. But definitely, 35,000 women dying is not acceptable. And I think it should start right from the point of the antenatal journey. The way we view pregnancy itself is not holistic. We look at the end point of a pregnancy, which is delivery, which is actually a very small step in this long journey that a woman goes through to deliver. And while our focus remains on that, and we try to prevent or we try to optimize outcomes at the end of a journey, where we should be beginning in the beginning of the journey, like you're saying, the preventive measures. So I think it's very, very important to focus on antenatal care. I mean, when a woman becomes pregnant, and far before that. If you look at how we treat our education system, or how we talk about success and how we train our children, we send them to coaching schools for acing IIT. It's so important to teach our girls what it is to become a mother, Yeah. So motherhood sometimes is an over-glorified thing. I think it's important that they go through knowledge should be the basis of making a choice about getting pregnant. And pregnancy eventually has to be a choice and not an expectation in a fully informed individual. So I think improving education and obviously, fighting poverty levels, giving more agency to women, and focusing much before a woman gets pregnant, and not just, when she's about to deliver, when really you may set them up for failure. So, Mohammad Fatahullah, one of the leaders in maternal health, once said that women are not dying because we can't prevent the diseases that they're dying from, especially not that we can't prevent what's going wrong in pregnancy. They're dying because societies and nations don't think it's worth saving their lives. And I think that's where the transformation can start.
Such a sad thing too, if the society
Yes,
thinks
it is
like that.
true also, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
so
I think anything that goes in the way, and financial incentivization may not be the answer. I'll take whatever they give, doing the Janani Suraksha Yojana and the Pradhan Mantri Yojana. They're all good. I'll take whatever they can give because, if a nation is investing in improving maternal outcomes, I'm grateful. But I think it has to be a revolution which starts at a much basic level, and that can only come through education. And I think going forward, the only equalizer in maternal health care is going to be technology.
Thank you. And I think you're doing incredible work in spreading this awareness. I'll now move on to Dr. Sivranjani. I've been chatting with her the entire evening, and I think she's a crusader in so many ways. So, Dr. Sivranjani, you've done considerable work in child health. And what do you think now is the hidden danger with adding energy mixes in children's drinks, which is very prevalently happening across the country?
We all know, everybody sitting here knows that adding milk mixes, first thing, dental caries. Second thing, the child is going to develop a craving for sweet taste. And this is the beginning of obesity. Now it's a pandemic now. Epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to say, obesity is there, and this is the beginning. This is the beginning, and whether it's sugar or jaggery, all the milk mixes are loaded with either of them. Bonvita or Boost or Little Joyce or Grizzo. All of these are loaded with either jaggery or sugar, and we have to stop this. We have to stop this, and obesity. Huh?
And how do we do that?
We have to raise awareness. We have to tell the mothers. Mothers are very vulnerable. It's very easy for them to believe that they should take the shortcut to give, nourish their child. Okay, they'll have some 101 millets in them, they'll have sugar, jaggery, and they say that they have double the amount of protein. What do they mean by double the amount of protein? If I give one egg and some tumbler of milk, my child's protein is done, and then again he's eating dal and rice. Why do I need extra protein? So, raising awareness, and government has to bring strict regulation. Like some countries have this red dot on foods containing excess sugar. So government has to do something like that, in the labeling. Okay, like how for organic food we have a green dot. Something like that, so that the parent knows, okay, if I'm buying this, I'm giving loads of sugar and jaggery to my child. And no shortcuts. Let children enjoy real food without watching TV, without watching cell phone. Eat the food and enjoy the food. This is the culture we have to create.
We have to imbibe that and create more awareness about this. Yes.
Adults also have to do that. We have to set an example first.
Yeah. Well said. I'll move on to Dr. Jamuna. Dr. Jamuna, you've been a pioneer in women's health again, and you've been a gynecologist for so many decades. So in your practice, what do you find are the most significant barriers to women accessing timely and high quality gynecological care, especially in rural India?
Thank you so much. Actually, I should thank the Times team for inviting me, and my good friend Dr. Aarti, who has connected me to this group, and the listeners, of course. The basic barrier is facility level barriers. Though we have facilities in districts or primary health centers, still they are not updated. Still, they have lack of human resource, nurses, doctors, and infrastructure also. And at the same time, the distance for the women to travel, especially from the remote areas, to come to the facility is so difficult. As today somebody said that in hilly areas, we have seen that there are no track or no road. They have to come either carried or, so such is the difficulty. And there is a lack of awareness among women that the facilities are equipped with so many projects and all those things, and they are never aware of these projects. And other thing is still the societal stigma is there. The women doesn't talk about her reproductive issues. And these things, I think, give a setback for her to come forward for her issues. And at the same time, I think we need to see that prospective numbers which we have achieved, though we have so many gaps, that institutional deliveries have been increased by 88% from 39% because of this Janani Surakshit Yojana, where they have given the cash, conditional cash transfer. And because of that, I think to some extent, the institutional deliveries have happened. And that is a, plus point, and it is a prospective point. I think
that's very, very important.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Satish, I'll come to you now. You, with your integration of AI, are doing amazing work in, preventing diseases in children. So neonatal and pediatric intensive care in India is still underdeveloped, especially in smaller cities. So what are the key infrastructure training gaps that need to be addressed? And with the rise in premature births and critical care needs for newborns, what advancements in technology and treatment do you think can bring about that change?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very important question, and very, very well thought about question as well. But the most important thing here is, yes, if you see across the country, newborn intensive care as well as pediatric intensive care, you have the best hospitals with the best equipment, with the best infrastructure, and the best people to man them. It's not just the equipment and the infrastructure. You need to have good people. It's not the machine alone. It's the men or the women behind the machine. But the problem is, just like how you have the best, you have the most, the pathetic kind of scene, when you go into the rural areas. So there's a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots, and the urban areas, the level 3 or level 4 centers in the cities, and the rural areas. So I wouldn't say there's no infrastructure or there's no equipment or there's no this thing. There is a lot. But the big question is, how do we bridge the gap?
Yes, that's
So
important.
that's the big question. We all are aware, and there's no easy solution to this. 2 cents worth of a solution would be, what we are doing at a smaller level is telemedicine. We have something like a cloud ICU, where in the intensive care in Hyderabad, because we have the whole expertise of the newborn intensive care specialists, the pediatric intensivists, you have the subspecialties, the nephrologist, the gastroenterologist, and the hemato-oncologist. The best way is if you could have a group or a network of hospitals connected with telemedicine, where the Supreme Court has come up with fantastic guidelines as to how it's got to be done. You can't prescribe medicines on the phone, but telemedicine is there. During COVID,
it's gaining
beautiful,
popularity recently, yes.
So if you could use that technology, we have IoT. Your monitors, I can see the monitor real time, not just a video of the monitor. It's connected through IoT. I can see a child, I can talk to the doctor, I can even, even the lab investigations are integrated. So my intensivist sitting here can cater to the intensive care needs of, even the rural areas. And that is one way Guru Reddy sir has mentioned one problem. He said the wife. I think, sir, this is one way you can sort it out, where you can have the specialist sitting in Hyderabad, and you could sort it out. So that is one thing, infrastructure. The second thing is we have we need fantastic nurses, the kind of quality care that we do, but there's a very high level of attrition. You train them. We have fantastic training modules, both in newborn and pediatric intensive care, but there's a huge attrition. And then obviously that's a learning process, and you need to go on and on.
That's attrition is in all fields,
a law of nature.
not just nurses in medicine, which is a reality we all deal with every day. Dr. Ruma Sinha, you've been a pioneer in laparoscopic and robotic surgeries. So minimally invasive surgery has revolutionized gynecological care. How do you see the adoption of robotic surgery affecting access to high quality care?
Thanks, Pooja, and thank you, Times Healthcare, for giving me this opportunity to actually put some of my thoughts across to everybody. I heard Pranati with a lot of interest, and actually Jamuna and everybody else here. When we talk about women and health, as a policymaker, government, as society, or even family members, the maximum attention the woman gets is when she's pregnant. Everybody will go to the best care that they need. Or at the end of the life, somebody diagnoses that she has a cancer. What happens to that woman when she has menarche at 10 years old, lives up to 80 years old? Who's looking after her gynecological and reproductive health in all those years? And that's something which we need to think about. Women may have simple pelvic pain secondary to simple things like fibroid, or maybe suffering from endometriosis. It just gets to the backside and nobody actually brings that to the forward. That is where the minimal access surgery and now the advent of robotics can help these women gain and improve their quality of life. So I'm just talking about simple thing like quality of life for women. If you look around in your home or yourself sometimes, you'll feel those are those few years where you actually did not bother. We went on with, even supposing you have simple period pain, you went on because somebody else needed the attention at that point of time. And I believe that giving them the best care, if patients or if women at that point require surgery, can be a game changer in the way they can take care of themselves, improve their quality of life, and of course, who's the benefit at their better quality of life? The family, the society,
Absolutely.
the nation. So that is where I think the integration of technology in giving women a better health care will definitely go down the road. I myself witnessed right from doing open surgery when I graduated to learning how to do laparoscopy and then learn how to do robotic surgery for the last 13, 14 years. There's a sea change. And the bottom line, if you look at gynecological problems and surgery, I would say all this, if they can bring an open surgery to zero, we have done great for other women of our country. And that's what we aim for. Thank you.
Just while we are at this, how do you think, in your experience, we can better integrate women's health and wellness into the larger healthcare conversations that happen around the country?
Yes, I think this is a very good point that you brought about. Unless we have conversations about women, their health, their quality of life at every forum, and I'm glad that we are having so many men sitting in this forum as well, because whenever I go to talk, most often I'm called to a women's organization or on a women's day to the women employee. I wish men are there because they are part to our getting better or having a better quality of life. So integrating everything together in the society form would actually be a great way to improve what we are trying to do for women in our country.
Dr. Reddy, menopause and perimenopause are often under-discussed in public health. What steps can healthcare providers and policy makers take to normalize conversations and care around midlife women's health? Ruma also said.
Yeah. So I think the fundamental thing right now women's healthcare needs, whether it's menopause, whether it's pregnancy, whether it's any other gynecological problem, is education and awareness. And I agree with Ruma when she says that as things stand now, increasing awareness and increasing education just for women is not going to work. I think you should make their families partners in their wellness. And again here, technology can play a big role for education and awareness. Education and awareness, because these are all very structured things people go through. I think like the journey of pregnancy, the journey of menopause, these are all physiological changes, but they instill fear because it's an unknown journey that people are undertaking. And if we improve awareness of these conditions, not just for women, but also for society in general and their families, and make them partners in the well-being of women, it will make a lot of difference. And when we talk of using technology for education, I don't think it should be bland messaging. Now cell phone everybody has. People are on social media. Very often the messaging that you see is extremely bland. People are just going to swipe across. You should look at your target audience. Package your message well. Either in the form of short films, animes, something that holds a person's interest, will read it and will actually relate it to a real life event. For instance, you can narrate a story about a maternal death and tell them about what were the reasons, Mrs. X died. And that will stay better in their minds than bland messaging. And this has to be to the overall society, and there should be no hesitation in talking about these things. And, I think overall, and we also have a great celebrity culture in our society, which in a way is good because we can leverage them also to package these messages. I think fundamentally it's improving awareness, improving education that is going to sort out most of these physiological changes that occur in a woman's life journey, that is pregnancy and menopause. I think it's the fear of the unknown which kind of, can make things worse.
Thank you. Going from women's health to neonatal health, Dr. Satish, what do you envision for neonatal and pediatric care in the next 5 years in India? And do you see a significant rise in technology-driven solutions like AI for early detection and monitoring?
Yeah. Thank you. That's that's a question which is actually close to my heart. If you see technology and how it would impact both newborn and pediatric care, I could tell you my personal experience with the NGO that I run over the last 9 years. What I have noticed is, see, now both my children are doctors, but when I ask them what is the kind of preventive health care that happened in their school, so their kind of preventive care was, what's the kind of off-thal examination you had? Can you see this number? Can you see this? And can you see that? So the kind of preventive health care was very, very, very basic, and it's not accurate. But we all know prevention is better than cure. So what we have done in the last sort of 9 years is, we thought the first and foremost thing is we had technology in place, number one. Number two, we had good infrastructure, and at the same time a good standard operating procedure as to how do we do the preventive health care. For example, if we have to do off-thal, everything from a refraction to a fundoscopy to a retinoscopy, everything has to be done in the periphery. So with that, what we have done close to 14,000 children across 5 Indian states. And the numbers are staggering. 22.5% of children have it. I myself, when I was
quite
5.5,
stat.
exactly, I couldn't see the board. I used to walk up to the board and then come back and write the notes. So obviously your performance comes down, right?
Yes.
So that is ophthalmology. So rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it, do it accurately. So that is
very
for eyes.
important, yes.
Next, if you see, we have 7 stations. One of the station is anthropometry. That means your obesity, your stunting, and your growth or wasting. As she said, obesity is a problem, so is, malnutrition, or so is stunting. You pick them up early, identify, you can do something about it. There's many ways you can do. Second. Third is, for example, again, childhood hypertension. How many doctors even know, other specialists know, that kids too develop hypertension? And in our percentage of children, I was discussing with you earlier, there were about 5.2% of children who have hypertension. And mind you, these are the children who, by the time they are 18 or 20, they have severe heart disease or kidney disease, or they end up dying. So it's either mortality or morbidity. So big numbers. At the same time, your audiometry. That means, am I using the best equipment? Am I using my OAE? Am I using my BERA? Am I using my tympanometry to diagnose them at that stage? So the percentage we picked up across these 5 states in, the kind of, either unilateral or bilateral deafness, or sensory neural hearing loss, or conductive hearing loss, is 3.2%. It's mind-boggling. So that is in terms of pediatric health. So let's go to mental health. That's something, again, we are working with IIIT, and we're trying to make huge strides there. We developed a system or a tool called Psych Screen, where I send a questionnaire to a mother, father, and an 11-year-old child, and based on that questionnaire, my tool can pick up whether the child is at risk or not.
Just one question. Is this tool being used only by you, or have you shared it with a lot of other hospitals across the country?
No. We are still, it's all validated, it's done, and we have we got it used in about 14,500 children. It's working beautifully. I'm working to have more numbers. And we have integrated that to machine learning as well. And what we're trying to build is the next level. How do you integrate something else to build it better and faster? With the detailed psychological assessments, what is the percentage? Can I make, see, for example, Psych Screen is picking up 15% of children who are at risk. Now, the actual children who are really having a problem with detailed assessments is 4.2%. So now how do I reduce that 10% of the children who are picked up? So those we call the false positives. So this is what we are learning, and hopefully in the next couple of months, with the integrated tools that we want to do, I think, wonders could be done.
That's amazing work you're doing.
Yeah.
We'll go back to Dr. Sivaranjani again. So from neonatal to adolescent health, especially among girls, is often neglected. So I'm saying adolescent health in young girls is often neglected. What steps can healthcare systems take to prioritize and address the specific needs of this group?
I think Dr. Satish has already addressed most of it. So I would say, whether it's a private school or government school, I think we need to have a counselor for the adolescents, or for that matter, any child to go and talk to. And it's very important to understand that it's not that we counsel the child alone. We counsel the family as a unit. Because most of the problems stem up from how the parents take care of the child, or, So it's very important. This is where I feel we are really totally lacking. Okay, we see that the child is eating well, okay, has taken bath, we have joined her in good school. That's it. And physical health, I think we have spoken enough about menstrual health, and adolescents need to know about sexual health. And also social media. How not to fall into the trap of, dangerous predators. This is one thing we have to make our adolescents aware of. If you see, Australia has brought a law, till 16 years they're not supposed to use social media.
Yes.
Maybe something like that should happen in India too.
Definitely. we're running out of time, so my last question to you, Dr. Jamuna.
Okay.
What role can preventive care, early detection and screening play in reducing maternal mortality and morbidity, particularly in low-resource settings?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. But adding to her adolescent health,
Yeah.
I think we have to talk about the abuse also at the same time. Nowadays, I think Foxy and all our members have taken a stride, and we have started one initiation called Dhira, and we are going to schools and colleges talking about those things and how to identify, and at the same time what are the protections taken. So just adding to that. And coming to our question, the prevention, I think prevention in the rural areas, it starts from the enhancing of the rural centers basically, and they have to be upgraded not only with the infrastructure but at the same time even with the human resources. And the women who are in remote areas, for them the accessibility should be there. And we know that, for that accessibility, we need ambulances and the proper referral system. The person who is looking after these women should identify the complications or imminent anything, and that person should be able to refer the women for a tertiary care. And at the same time, and these technology like telemedicine, all these things do help. And now we have this AI-generated colposcopy, which is very good. And if we take into the remote areas, I think we can identify cervical cancers very early. And that way we can give the, quality of services to these women.
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course.
So can I just add to the maternal mortality bit? So this, I think, there's a lot that we can be doing towards reducing maternal mortality, particularly in the remote areas. Access is one thing that she has mentioned. But we know during COVID times, we reduced the entire antenatal visits to just 4. 4 important visits, where, you started at maybe 8 to 12 weeks and stratified those who could develop hypertension or who had risk of developing some form of fetal anomalies. And so the chore of constantly visiting a health center just to get your iron and calcium tablets or 2 doses of tetanus toxoid itself exhausts women, and families. So I think moving on to a digital platform, that will be the greatest equalizer. Because if you reduce the number of visits, you'll enhance antenatal care. By the time you bring them for that ultimate event of delivery, the better state they are in, the less amount of disease, anemia and hypertension they have, it's far easier for them to navigate the process of delivery and come out of it well. So strengthening antenatal care and not making it a brick and mortar game. You don't need to have a physical facility, but you should enhance technology which can reach and become a great equalizer. And it can't be just based on financial incentives, because when you put into place financial incentives, you automatically create middlemen also.
But adding to that, I think now after this COVID, no women would like to go for, video consultations. They say that, no, we don't want a video consultation and we want
It's
to
a
come
culture,
physically for the antenatal checkups or whatever. And they feel confident and, comfortable coming to a obstetrician for their examination. Probably we can reduce the number of visits, as
Yeah,
you say.
we have to.
But then I think they are more comfortable and confident when they visit physically.
Another last thing we like to mention is the ORS crusade, which Dr. Shivranjani is doing. Would you like to talk about that, please, before we end this
Yeah,
discussion?
this is one thing which is giving sleepless nights to me and my family secondarily, because of the way I'm passionately trying to let everybody know that we have to hydrate people the right way, not just children. Everybody. This is summer, diarrhea, vomiting, dehydration. So the best liquid to give to correct dehydration is WHO recommended formula ORS. You'll have lot of Tetra Paks in every pharmacy, online pharmacy, e-market, whatever, with the label ORS with a suffix or prefix. but they are high sugar drinks which will worsen diarrhea and dehydration. Even if they advertise and tell you that they are good for dengue or typhoid, please don't give to your loved ones or to anybody. Only WHO recommended formula ORS for correcting dehydration. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your valuable time and the things you've shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Times Network.
Thank you, experts. That was truly enlightening. May I please request our honorable speakers to please remain with us just a little longer. We would like to take this moment to present a token of our appreciation, thanking you for your time and your presence here today and for sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. After this group photo opportunity, may I please request the moderator of this session, Ms. Pooja Sethi, to kindly present mementos to all our speakers on the stage. A big thank you to our eminent panelists. Can we please have a huge round of applause for them? That was truly an enlightening discussion that we just witnessed. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.